Welcome back, guys. We have another lesson today on our next book of the Bible. If you remember, we've been going through the Old Testament books in the Bible, and we are now into the major prophets. So of the major prophets, we've already talked about Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Lamentations. So the next one is Ezekiel. So grab a piece of paper, draw the diagram, and let's get started. So when we talk about Ezekiel, well, let me back up. When we've talked about the other major prophets, they were prophets to the kings of either Israel or Judah. It's going to be a little bit different this time. So let's talk about the context and why it's different. So here's our picture here. Where are we in time again? So Solomon was the last king of the united kingdom of Israel and Judah, but then they split up. So Israel, at this point, has been defeated by the Assyrians, so all we've got left is Judah. So for Judah, the country that came in and defeated them was Babylon. But Babylon didn't do it in just one battle. They came in 3 different times over many years. And when they came in the first time, they came in, defeated it, and they took a lot of people out. And they carried them off to Babylon. One of those people was Daniel. And we'll talk about him in the next lesson. But I'll go ahead and introduce that. The second time that Babylon came in, they took off a guy named Ezekiel, who we're going to talk about today. And then there was a third time where they completely destroyed the city of Jerusalem. Up until now, they haven't totally destroyed it. The third time they do, and they carry off the rest of the people. So when we look at Ezekiel, Ezekiel was a prophet not to the kings of Judah or Israel. He was a prophet to the Jews. Where was he? In Babylon. So as all these people go to Babylon, God said, I need a prophet to talk to them. So Ezekiel was that prophet. He was a priest while he was in Jerusalem. And he actually didn't get called to be a prophet until after being in Babylon 5 years. So he got his call to be a prophet while he was in Babylon. If you notice that all the different prophets have had different callings. They've all been a little bit different. Well, for this guy, God shows up and he stretches out his hand. And in his hand is a scroll. Now, you all know what a scroll is. Scroll is kind of like what they would use as a book. It was a long piece of paper, and they would unroll it, write or read it, and then roll it back up. Well, of course, there are words on it. And those words were of Lamentations. Remember what Lamentations were? We talked about it last week. Lamentations are expressions of sorrow, expressions of grief, of mourning. So not good words. They're sad words here on the scroll. Also, words of woe. So these aren't such good words. But you know what God said? Here's God up here. He said, eat and speak to Israel. And of course, Israel at that time was in Babylon. So, that's exactly what he did. He did what he was told to do. Ezekiel put it in his mouth and he ate it. You know what it tasted like? Do you think it would taste bad? It didn't. It tasted, God's words tasted like honey. So pretty cool way to be called a prophet, right? But that doesn't mean that the rest of the time was, as good as honey. Things were not so good. So when we are now in Babylon, he can't say you need to stop sinning, you need to repent, or this will happen, because it's already happened, right? He's got to go after it a different way. So what he needs the people to understand, what God wants him to talk to them about, are 4 things. So let's talk about the messages that Ezekiel had. The first one was that the exile. Now let's talk about exile again. Exile is when you have to leave your home and have to go live somewhere else you don't want to live. Okay? So this exile, having to live in Babylon, is judgment. God is punishing them, and they need to understand that this isn't just something that happened, that there is a reason this happened, and it's because they had sinned. Okay? So God is being a judge. He's got a gavel in his hand. He said, you know what? I'm rendering verdict. You're going to be punished because you sinned. So he needs for them to understand that it has now happened and that they are being punished and that it will last a long time. So Jerusalem at this time, let's draw our clock. Okay. At this time, Ezekiel has had to leave Jerusalem, but Jerusalem is still standing. So the people think, okay, we'll go back soon. Jerusalem's still standing. This won't last long. The problem is, it's going to last a long time because this is God's judgment. And it has gotten to so bad in terms of their sin that God has to punish them a long time. So he needs for the people to understand, you're going to be punished, and it's going to last a while. Not only, though, is God going to punish Israel because of their sin, he's going to be a judge again. And this time, it's for the other nations. God will judge the other nations too, because they're sinning and because of how they have treated Israel, his kingdom, his people. They have either gone in and created war against them, or they have laughed and been happy because they have been taken captives to Babylon. So God is not happy with them either. The third thing that he talks about is that the individual person is responsible for their own sin. So he needs for people to understand you are responsible for your sin. So the people were like, we as a group have maybe sinned, but it's not really me. I'm not that bad. It's other people. And you know what? The people down the road, they'll pay for the sin. I'm just going to keep doing it. And they had this group mentality that it was the group issue. It was somebody else's issue. It wasn't mine. And he said, oh, no. You are responsible for your sin. Just like we are. Jesus came and died for each individual person. And we, as individual people, have to come to God and have to accept Jesus as our Savior. Your parents can't do it for you. Your aunts, your uncles, your friends, your grandparents, they can't do it for you. You have to do it. It's up to you. And that's what this is all about. They were thinking it's somebody else's fault. They would blame their parents. And people still do it today. It's my parents' fault that I turned out this way. No. Your parents had an impact, but you chose which way you're going to go. You chose if you're going to do good things with it or bad things with it. And today, it is still the case. So don't think this is just them back then. It's us today too. And the fourth one, and we hear this a lot with the prophets, they talk about you're going to be judged, but they also talk about hope. So in this case, the hope is that God will bring his people back to the land. You know what? He has to. Because he made a promise a long time ago to Abraham that Abraham and his descendants would inherit this land. So he can't take it away. He can't take it back. He can make them leave for a while to teach them a lesson, but he promised that they would have it the rest of their lives. So he has to bring them back, and he's going to. So those are the messages that he had, but he had some very unusual ways of getting the message across. So remember last time when we talked about Jeremiah, he used a lot of parables. God used parables with him, and he used those same parables to teach the people. Well, Ezekiel did too. But he had some additional things. One of the things were one-man plays. Have you ever been in a play in school or maybe in church here? Yeah, you all have been in plays here at church, or at least you had the opportunity to be. Well, he would have these one-man plays. He would act something out to try to get the people to understand. I'll just share a couple of them with you, because there are a whole bunch of them. I'll just share a couple. One of them was that God said, I want you to show the people what's going to happen to Jerusalem. So remember, I told you just a minute ago, Jerusalem is still standing, okay? So we've got our town here, all of our little houses, the temple, the market. So we've got Jerusalem. And the people think everything's going to be fine, that it will be okay. It's got these big walls. It's going to be fine. Well, no. Because God can get through any wall, can he? So what he did was, God told him, I want you to build a model of the town. And then I want you to put battering rams against it. I want you to put the toy soldiers in it that are going against it. I want you to build the camps where they are camping outside waiting on the people to surrender or waiting to go in and destroy the city. I mean, he's playing with toy soldiers here. A little crazy, huh? But he was using it, and God was using it to show the people, you know what? Jerusalem is going to fall. Don't think that just because Jerusalem is still there that you won't be in exile long. Because they were. Now, what does siege mean? I use the word siege. It's where people come in, an army comes in, stays there, and starts battling against it. Or in some cases, part of the battle is to just let them sit and just starve to death. Or not have any water or whatever. So he showed Jerusalem under siege. Another one. Now, this one's a little crazy. He was laying on his bed. Well, I'm sorry, he was laying down. God said, I want you to lay down. And I want you to lay on your side. And I want you to lay on your left side for 390 days. For Israel. And then after you've done that, I want you to roll to your right side. For 40 days for Judah. And what he was saying was, they're going to be punished. And it's going to be a long time, because every day that you lay on your side is 1 year of punishment that they're going to have to go through. We'll draw our line here. So he had to lay on his side, on his left side for 390 days, and then roll to his right side for 40 days. Kind of crazy, huh? Would you want to just lay down for over a year on your side, do nothing else all day long, just lay there on your side? That's not much fun, does it? So he had one-man plays, but he also had something else. He had lots and lots of visions. And I'm just going to share a couple of them with you, okay? When he was in Babylon, God gave him a vision of what was happening in Jerusalem. And it was with the temple. So let's draw our temple. Oh, I need to drop down a little bit. Give yourself some room here. We're going to draw something on top of the temple. Okay? So we've got the temple in Jerusalem. Okay? Here's how we draw our temple. And this is, for them, what was now. Okay? So what was happening at the time that all this was going on. Okay? And he sees this cloud and this fire in the cloud. So it was foggy, it was cloudy, and he looked inside of it, and it was sitting over the temple. And there were angels there, and they had their wings spread out to where their wings touched, and there were 4 of them. Okay, 2 in the front, 2 in the back. And sitting inside of it, in the middle of it, and on top, was God on his throne. I know it just looks like a jumbled mess. Sorry, guys. Draw your angels, and then we'll put God on his throne up here, okay? So he got to see God sitting on his throne. Okay, there's his chair. So God is sitting on the throne with the angels in the midst of all this smoke and all this fire. And what he saw really disturbed him. God had come to the temple when the temple was made, when the temple was built. And God came and lived with his people. He was right in the middle of them. But they have sinned so much that God said, I'm going to have to leave. And so they go off to the east, and God leaves the temple. And it's not just the temple, it's his temple. It is his dwelling place, his house on earth, and he has to leave it. So that was at the beginning of the book. By the time you get to the end of the book, he gets another vision. And this time he gets a vision of another temple. And as he gets this vision, there's a man there who is measuring every inch of it, every bit of it. So he's using his measuring stick. Let's put our ruler here. So he's got a ruler, and he's measuring every bit of it. And of course, Ezekiel writes it down so that in the future, when it's time to rebuild it, they know exactly the size to rebuild it. So here's our new temple in the future. And what happens is, God comes back. And here's this fire and the smoke, and God is sitting on his temple again. He comes back in the future. So talk about hope. He's going to bring the people back to the land, and he's going to be in it when he's there. Another one, which is so cool. This is one of my favorites. Okay, so God brings him in the spirit into a valley. So we're going to try to draw a valley here, okay, guys? We're going to try our best to draw a valley. So a valley is between 2 hills or 2 mountains, okay? So I'm going to draw some mountains here. So we've got the slopes of the land. And right here in the middle, you've got this valley. And so here Ezekiel is watching all this. And God shows him what's in there. And there are bones. Just bones everywhere. Just full and full of bones. In the valley. And they're dry. I mean, they've been there a long time. There's no flesh on them anymore. There's no muscle. They're dry. And God says, Ezekiel, what do you see? He says bones. Dry bones. Very dry. Very. He used the word very. Very dry bones. He says, I want you to prophesy to the bones. I want you to prophesy. Come together. Put on muscle. Put on flesh. And stand up. So that's what Ezekiel did. He started hearing this sound. It was a rattle. It was a rattling sound. Can you imagine bones coming together and you could hear them hit each other? That's what happened. So the bones came together. And so the foot bone connected to the leg bone. And it kept going up. And so the bones came together and they connected bone to bone. So he starts to see these things stand up. And then flesh comes on them. So now what he sees are people standing up in this valley. And God said, now Ezekiel, command breath to come into them. Prophesy breath. So Ezekiel did. So they started breathing. So here comes the breath. And what he ended up with was an army. And God said, this army is the house of Israel. I'll remove some of my lines so you can see it better. The house of Israel. Now, this is a prophecy, so this is to happen in the future to then. And if you listen to the scholars, they believe that this has happened. This happened less than 100 years ago. What happened was Israel had not, as a people, had not been in their land for thousands of years. And back in 1948, they came back and they were a new nation again. They formed a nation. From nothing for thousands of years to forming a nation, they came back together. So what I want you to get is that the Bible, that these books that we're talking about are not just what happened a long time ago. They don't matter anymore, because they most certainly do. Because a lot of the prophecies that we're talking about with these major prophets and with the minor prophets in some cases, they're still happening. They are still occurring. The Bible is living. The Bible is still showing up today. That's why we need to know these books. That's why we need to know the Bible. Because God is not done with his work. He still has more to come. Jesus is going to come back. And all these prophecies, we might get to see some of them. So I want you to learn these Bible books and be excited when you see these great things happen, because you can see God working even today. So our next book is our last of the major prophets. It's Daniel, and we'll talk about that next.